making headlines. Palestine expresses gratitude to the Maldives for its decision to support the International Court of Justice (ICJ) in taking further measures against Israeli forces. The foreign minister returns to the Maldives after concluding his two-day visit to Qatar, and the Maldives calls for strong measures to sustain tuna stocks at the 28th session of IOTC.
Welcome to the English News. I'm your host Malak Ahmad Fayaz. Now for the news in detail. Palestinians express gratitude to the Maldives for its decision to support the International Court of Justice (ICJ) in taking further measures against Israeli forces. Palestinians have expressed gratitude to the Maldives for its decision to support the International Court of Justice (ICJ) in taking further measures against Israeli forces. South Africa has filed a complaint with the ICJ against Israeli forces regarding the attacks on Palestine. President Dr. Mohamed Moiso has voiced full support for South Africa's submission to the ICJ. As such, the Palestinian government has thanked President Dr. Moiso for this stance. The Palestinian government also shared on social media its appreciation for the Maldives' efforts in various international forums. In a social media post, President Dr. Moiso emphasized that the international community should not remain silent in the face of the inhumane acts committed by Israeli forces in Rafah. He affirmed the Maldives' full support for South Africa's ICJ proposal to take further measures against Israeli forces. Additionally, President Dr. Moiso called for an end to the Israeli forces' inhumane actions against Palestinian citizens and urged compliance with international law. He stressed the need for immediate ICJ action. President Dr. Moiso also reiterated his call for recognizing Palestine as an independent state with East Jerusalem as its capital as per the pre-1967 borders. He assured that Maldivian citizens would continue to advocate for Palestinian rights until Palestine is declared an independent state and its people can live in peace and freedom. Since October of last year, millions have been displaced by Israeli military attacks on Palestinians. The Israeli forces have now ordered residents in eastern and central Rafah to evacuate. Rafah is currently home to about 1.4 million Palestinians. More than 35,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli military attacks. Minister of Economic Development and Trade Mohammed Saeed has departed on an official visit to the UK to participate in a convention focused on business and investment. The ministry underscored that the primary objective of Minister Saeed's visit to the UK, specifically to attend the Commonwealth Trade and Investment Roundtable, is to seek the assistance of the UK's financial ministries for Sri Lanka's financial sector. Providing insight into the discussions to be held, the ministry conveyed that important aspects of the Maldives International Finance Service Authority and Development Bank will be addressed to further facilitate their services. During this visit, Minister Saeed is scheduled to meet with UK administration officials to discuss a wide range of topics related to the economy and business. Minister of Foreign Affairs Musa Zamir returns to the Maldives after concluding his two-day visit to Qatar from May 11th to 13th.
The primary objective of the visit was to solidify and strengthen the bilateral relations between the two countries. During his trip, Minister Zamir met with Qatar's Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al Thani to discuss avenues for further enhancing the long-standing bilateral ties. Moreover, Minister Zamir expressed sincere gratitude towards Qatar for its unwavering support in strengthening the social and economic ties between both countries. He further commended Qatar's ongoing efforts in voicing opposition to the genocide and terror faced by Palestine. Discussions also included ways both countries could collaborate on global issues. Accompanying Minister Zamir on this official trip were esteemed officials, including Bilateral Secretary Dr. Hala Hamid and Ambassador-at-Large Dr. Fazil Najib. This year marks the 40th anniversary of bilateral relations between the Maldives and Qatar, adding significance to the visit.
The Maldives calls for strong measures to sustain tuna stocks at the 28th session of the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission IOTC. A high-level delegation from the Ministry of Fisheries and Economic Ocean Resources is attending the 5-day session in Bangkok, Thailand. It will address various issues related to the sustainability of tuna stocks in the Indian Ocean. The Maldives is advocating for member states to prioritize the sustainability of tuna stocks, focusing on the adoption of strong management measures for drifting fish aggregating devices, FADs, and shark conservation. Additionally, the Maldives will push for the implementation of a management procedure for skipjack tuna. During the session, the Maldives emphasized the need for science-based management plans to protect against threats to fisheries and to enhance the restoration and management of tuna stocks. The Maldives also aims for the IOTC to lead regional fisheries management organizations, RFMOs, in adopting science-based conservation and management measures reflecting the nation's dedication to the well-being of coastal communities and the health of tuna stocks. The IOTC is an intergovernmental organization responsible for managing tuna and tuna-like species in the Indian Ocean. Maldives and Azerbaijan holds official talks on strengthening the bilateral relationship between the two countries. The discussions took place during Minister of Divehi Language, Culture and Heritage Adam Nasir Ibrahim's state visit to Azerbaijan. As part of his visit, Minister Nasir engaged in bilateral talks with Azerbaijan's Minister of Culture, Adil Karimli. Minister Nasir provided an in-depth overview of areas where the Maldives requires technical expertise and knowledge, particularly in culture and heritage, emphasizing ways Azerbaijan could potentially assist in enhancing the cultural and heritage sectors of the Maldives. Moreover, Minister Adil expressed his gratitude to Minister Nasir for representing the Maldives at the Shusha Cultural Capital of the Islamic World 2024 event, highlighting the rich cultural history of Shusha city. He also discussed the upcoming United Nations Climate Change Conference COP29 to be held in Azerbaijan later this year, focusing on the impact of climate change on the cultural sector and the vital role of culture in environmental protection. He further conveyed optimism about furthering cooperation to strengthen the cultural ties and bilateral relations between the Maldives and Azerbaijan. Additionally, during his visit, Minister Nasir met with the Director General of the Islamic World Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, ISESCO, Dr. Salim Al-Malik, to discuss the potential inclusion of Maldives' coral mosques in the permanent list of ISESCO's World Heritage Sites. Minister Nasir's visit to Azerbaijan is part of a gracious invitation from the Director General of ISESCO. Minister of Climate Change, Environment and Energy Tariq Ibrahim reiterates the commitment to temporarily suspend ongoing developmental projects if issues on coral bleaching emerge under any circumstances. The minister's remarks were in line with the cautions issued by the respective authorities to hold certain developmental initiatives, highlighting the concerns associated with coral bleaching. Speaking on a program aired on PSMNEWS, Minister Tariq stressed that coral bleaching is a common global issue. The minister disclosed that the first cases of coral bleaching were observed in the Maldives in 1997, noting that most coral reefs survived regardless of the numerous corals whitened. He further revealed that the latest cases of coral bleaching occurred in 2016, with approximately 73% of reefs encountered the environmental crisis. However, the minister assured that the majority of the damaged coral reefs have been restored over the past few years. Underscoring that prolonged periods of warm and tranquil weather inevitably result in coral bleaching, Minister Tariq highlighted the forecasts of scientists which anticipates the phenomenon occurring in the Maldives. The minister stated that agreements have been made with respective contractors to stall developmental projects that may impact the reefs directly or indirectly. He additionally unveiled that the agreements were signed by the companies prior to the granting of permit to contractors. The agreement outlines the terms of halting developmental initiatives for the month following the peak season of coral bleaching. Ministry of Finance reveals that the Green Fund comprised $77.8 million by the end of February 2024. The Green Fund report publicized by the ministry stipulates the accumulation of $6.6 million by February 2024, with $6 million spent by the fund on the expenses of various projects since January 2024. Green tax is a tax levied on tourists aiming to generate revenue to financially assist in environmental projects. The tax is imposed on tourists in resorts, hotels, guest houses, and safaris. As such, tourists spending their vacations in resorts and safaris are to pay at a rate of $6 daily as green tax. Meanwhile, tourists staying in hotels in inhabited islands or guest houses registered with more than 50 rooms are charged $6 on a daily basis. Likewise, tourists staying in hotels in residential areas with 50 rooms or fewer are also charged at a rate of $3 daily. Statistics on the Green Fund released by the ministry are as follows: December 2023, $71 million, January 2024, $6 million, February 2024, $6.6 million. Hence, it can be concluded that within the first 2 months of 2024, $13 million was generated through green tax. The Green Fund has financially assisted in 10 projects in February, with the greatest expenses incurred for the Greater Malé Waste-to-Energy project. A total of $907,000 was spent on the project solely. Minister of Education Dr. Ismail Shafi announces that the National Teachers Training Program and the project of installing air conditioners in public schools will commence in the upcoming academic year. Speaking to PSMNEWS, Minister Dr. Shafi revealed that the project will be carried out with collaborative efforts of the government and private entities. The minister disclosed that the project will be launched in a cost-effective manner, following the identification of schools in which solar panels can be installed. Affirming that efforts are underway to monitor the electricity situation of schools prior to installing ACs, he stated that AC installation will commence during this month. The installation of ACs in all public schools is an initiative recommended by President Dr. Mohammad Muizzu, following discussions held in the schools during his official visits to the islands. Minister Dr. Shafi also expressed confidence in the completion of this project before the academic year of 2026 commences. Furthermore, Minister Dr. Shafi reveals that the National Teachers Training Program aims to acknowledge and increase the respect for teachers, reduce the amount of time spent in schools, while establishing a good and healthy environment within the school. Many parliamentarians takes the opportunity to express their gratitude for the chance to represent their constituents and their satisfaction with the work accomplished during the closing session of the 19th Parliament. The latest parliamentary statistics show that the 19th Parliament held 513 sessions, introduced 210 bills and completed 178. Several parliamentarians, when given the chance to speak, highlighted their sincere efforts for their constituencies, emphasizing that they had not misused their positions. Speaking at the session, Musa Siraj, the current leader of the parliamentary group PG for the People's National Congress PNC, said that all his promises for this 5-year term were included in the state budget, and he was pleased that many projects had been completed collaboratively. He also assured that he had not engaged in any business that would compromise his integrity or the trust of the citizens. Meanwhile, parliamentarian Imtiaz Fahmi expressed his hope that the new parliamentarians would prioritize the interests of the citizens over their own. He urged them to refrain from leveraging their influence to manipulate the courts, acknowledging that the 19th Parliament and the previous government had failed in this regard. The parliamentarians reflected on their satisfactory performance and shared their hopes and advice for the upcoming 20th Parliament. They encouraged the new parliamentarians to improve attendance and always prioritize the interests of the public. The members of the 20th Parliament are set to be sworn in on May 28th. The Maldives Inland Revenue Authority (MIRA) records a 13.6% increase in state revenue for April compared to the same month last year. The latest statistics published by MIRA show that revenue for April reached $137 million, marking a 13.6% rise from the previous year. It is also a 4.8% increase over the projected amount for this year. MIRA attributes this revenue growth to improved collections across various sectors. The goods and services tax (GST) was the largest contributor, bringing $94 million. Income tax followed with $9.6 million. Airport development fees contributed $65 million. Departure tax accounted for $7 million, and green tax added $7 million. Other taxes and fees total $12 million. The increased revenue compared to April last year is primarily due to higher GST, airport tax and fees, and green tax collections. Maldivian, the national airline, announces the decision to lease a medium-haul flight Airbus A319 or A320 current engine option CEO series for international flight operations with a proposed lease period of 3 years. Maldivian has previously engaged in the utilization of aircraft through extended lease agreements for its operational requirements. The airline aims to enhance its services with this new addition by September 2024. As part of the government-led initiative to expand Maldivian services and fleet, the airline recently added a fourth ATR aircraft on May 8th. With this addition, Maldivian's fleet now comprises 25 aircrafts. The airline is actively working to further expand its fleet, thereby consolidating its position in the market. India and Iran signs a 10-year contract to develop and equip the strategic Chabahar port in Iran as India seeks to grow trade in West and Central Asia. The agreement will give India 10-year access to use the port located close to Iran's southeastern border with Pakistan, according to Iran's Ministry of Roads and Urban Development. The contract will in turn see India Ports Global Limited (IPGL) invest $370 million into providing strategic equipment and developing the transport infrastructure of the port. The United States, US, which has warm ties with India but a long adversarial relationship with Iran, had accepted the port project while the US military was in Afghanistan, as it saw New Delhi as a valuable partner to back the Kabul government that fell in 2021. But Washington warned Monday that Indian companies could face sanctions as US relations sour with Iran over Tehran's support for Hamas in its war with Israel. Iran's urban development minister and India's ports and shipping minister signed the contract in the town of Chabahar in a ceremony broadcast live on state media. India in 2016 agreed to finance the development of the Iranian port as a trading hub for Central Asia as Prime Minister Narendra Modi sought to revive economic ties with Tehran after the lifting of sanctions. Modi and former Iranian President Hassan Rouhani oversaw the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding (MOU) for the provision of line of credit from India's Exim Bank to develop the port. The development of the port, however, stalled despite waivers to sanctions that the United States began reimposing in 2018 after withdrawing from a landmark 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. The Indian minister said that the partnering nations are seeking to develop Chabahar port as much as possible, taking into account the interests of the two countries for joint access to regional markets. Myanmar's embattled junta is pressing ahead with military conscription State media said with video footage showing new recruits being marched to training centers across the country. The military is struggling to crush widespread opposition to its rule following its 2021 coup that ended an experiment with democracy and plunged Myanmar into turmoil. In February, the junta said it would enforce a law allowing it to call up all men aged 18 to 35 to serve in the military, sending thousands queuing for visas outside foreign embassies in Yangon. Junta number 2, So Win, visited Yangon on Monday and was briefed on the systemic selection of those being called up, the state-owned Global New Light of Myanmar newspaper said. The first batch of recruits began training in April according to state broadcaster MRTV, which did not say how many had been signed up. Recruits from the second batch have begun arriving at their training camps, according to a montage broadcast by MRTV last week. The images show dozens of men purportedly at different locations across the country, walking in lines to training centers, some led by soldiers or marching bands. Groups of women and soldiers form tunnels to greet some of them with flowers or place garlands on their necks. Natmok is the hometown of Aung San, who spearheaded the independence struggle against British colonial rule and is revered by Myanmar's military, which he founded. His daughter, democracy figurehead Aung San Suu Kyi, has been detained by the military since the coup and jailed on charges critics say are designed to remove her from politics. After arriving at their training centers, the second batch of recruits took a medical test and were issued with food, military equipment, and a stipend, MRTV said. It did not say how many men were included in the second batch. Lamine Yamal and Rafinha strike to earn Barcelona a 2-0 win over Real Sociedad, taking their team second, a point above Catalan rivals Girona. Defeat is a setback to La Real's ambitions of playing Europa League football next season, leaving them 7th behind Real Betis, who won on Sunday. Last season's champions Barcelona are playing for nothing but pride in the final weeks of a disappointing campaign, and finishing above high-flying minnows, Girona is imperative to achieve even a modicum of that. Real Madrid sealed their title win at a count after Barcelona were beaten 4-2 by Girona little over a week ago. Barca's brightest light, Yamal opened the scoring after 40 minutes and Rafinha added a late penalty to seal the win. Barca coach Xavi told Movistar, La Real are a great team, it is an important victory for them and they had a good game in general. Xavi benched Uruguayan centre-back Ronald Araujo, bereft of form this season and whose red card against Paris Saint-Germain, PSG contributed heavily to their Champions League collapse. With Madrid swiping La Liga back off the Catalans, they end the season trophyless and licking their wounds. Xavi, who will stay in charge next season after ditching his exit plan, started defender Inigo Martinez in place of Araujo and Pedri Gonzalez in midfield. The Canary Islanders still building form and fitness after a string of injury problems ahead of Euro 2024 and helped Barca control the game. Striker Robert Lewandowski was unusually active in his team's pressing, perhaps motivated by the race to finish as La Liga's top scorer. At the other end, Marc-Andre ter Stegen denied Geraldo Becker after the burst beyond Pau Kobasi, but the Suriname international had pushed the young defender in any case. Shortly afterwards, Becker got in behind Barcelona's high line again and this time fired home but was correctly flagged offside. A portrait by British painter Francis Bacon of his great love sold for $27.7 million at Sotheby's spring sales in New York, topping the first night of contemporary art auctions that grossed $234.6 million. The work fell short of the $30 million to $15 million range the house had estimated for the portrait, the first in a series of 10 the painter made of George Dyer between 1966 and 1968, which was making its debut at auction. The highest price paid for a single panel portrait by Bacon is $70.2 million, which came from the same Dyer cycle. American painter Joan Mitchell, whose works have led to a revaluation of paintings by women artists, was one of the stars of the evening. Her work Noon exceeded $22.6 million, maintaining an upward trend that began last November when two pieces by the second-generation American Expressionism artist fetched over $20 million for the first time. A record sale stands at $29.1 million. The night set other records such as the $19 million paid for work by Andy Warhol and Jean-Michel Basquiat, the highest ever paid for collaboration of this kind, and the nearly $23 million for work by Lucio Fontana, the highest price ever paid for the Italian artist at auction. A sculpture by Frank Stella also went for over $15 million. Another rising star was recently deceased African-American artist Faith Ringgold, whose work was sold for more than $1.5 million, 3 times more than her last record. With sales of $14.9 billion last year, the art market dropped 14% compared with 2022, although online transactions saw a 285% jump. Sotheby's hopes to collect between $549 and $784 million this week in New York after the good results in Europe in a market led by American investors and collectors, closely followed by buyers from Asia.
That's all the news we have for today. Thank you all for watching.